Hello, Janine, and welcome to the Codebar Stories podcast. I'm really excited to deep dive into this chat with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me along. I'm super excited to get discussing. And yeah, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Been a really nice past weekend. Today's Monday, so a nice start to the week. Yeah, it's been good so far.
How are you doing, Phoebe?
Yeah, oh wow. Unfortunately, I'm feeling a bit ill. I think there must be a cold going around in London because it's found me. But yes, very excited to be here.
Well, thank you, Janine, for coming on the podcast. And yeah, like I said, I'm so excited to deep dive into your tech journey. There are some things I do know about your journey and what you've done, and there are some bits that I don't know. So I'm really excited to dive deep. So let's start right at the beginning. At what moment did you realize tech was a career for you?
Hmm. So actually, growing up, I wasn't particularly good at STEM subjects in school. Math was definitely not my forte, and I actually studied marketing in university from a bachelor's degree. And once I graduated and I started working in the yacht industry, doing marketing in the south of France, I quickly realized that it wasn't quite what I wanted to do, and I didn't feel like it was very fulfilling. So for that reason, I decided to take time outside of work in the evenings, on weeknights, and also on the weekends to pick up a new skill. And so I decided to learn how to code just because it was available as free online resources, and I just thought it was something that could be cool to learn. And that's how I actually started learning how to code. And eventually, that initial curiosity developed into a huge hobby of mine. And that's when I started to think, okay, maybe this is something that I can pursue as a career option. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. And had you seen any code before deciding, oh, I'm gonna learn this new hobby, or was it a complete surprise?
So, yes, I have actually, because I used to work more on the e-marketing side of things. So, a lot of the times I would have to deal with the company's website or deal with HTML emails. And I would often send emails to the developers who are working on those websites and emails to ask them to make certain changes and stuff like that. So, I've had very, I guess, brief knowledge on HTML and also CSS and stuff like that initially. And that's actually the reason why I decided to learn a bit more about how things can be changed and what I can do. Just because I thought, well, if I always have to email the developers, why not take a look at it myself and figure out how to do it and understand what needs to be done in order to change something? So, yeah.
Mine was I remember like the MySpace days of like going in, and I think Phoebe, we spoke about this as well in one of the previous episodes of like, wanting to change like the background color of like your MySpace page or something, and then but not kind of realizing at the time that you were quote coding, and it was
Yeah.
only then, years later when I then learnt to code, I look back and go, oh, like I was coding like as a
Yeah.
teenager. That's really cool.
That is so true. And also, I think that's like the fun side of coding. A lot of the times when people think about coding, they might quickly jump to thinking, oh, it can be quite monotonic and quite boring and quite dull. But actually, coding can in itself be a super fun and creative activity to do. And there's so much that you can explore when it comes to working in the tech industry. So for sure, like I love how, from your journey, it stemmed from a place of fun and creativity for sure.
Yeah, I love even like now sometimes if there's a web page, and there's a pop-up that's like blocking some content, I'll like, inspect element, open it up, and then go like visibility none so that I can then see the content. And I feel
Yeah.
like such a hacker, even though like now it is my job.
Definitely. We love those little freebies, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So from the moment you then, when you were in marketing, you said, okay, like this is now a hobby. At
Mhm.
what point did that hobby then, that the idea go, oh, okay, actually this could be actually a career for me. Like, oh, was there a pivotal moment then when it changed?
Absolutely. So I actually moved to London after that internship, and I was still working in marketing. And once I moved to London, I started attending a lot of different tech events because at the time I didn't know anybody who coded. I didn't know any software engineers. I didn't have that many friends who were into coding. And so when I moved to London, I really wanted to expand that side and like meet other people who were also coders. And I remember very fondly that one of the tech events I attended, my mentor at the time, she was a complete stranger, but I saw her do a talk about how she did a career change from business development to software engineering to then cybersecurity engineer. And that completely inspired me because before that talk, I always used to think, well, I don't have a computer science degree, or always thought I learned on my own. And so obviously that means I don't have the skills to be a software engineer. And listening to that talk, it really changed my mindset and something clicked in my mind like, okay, if I really like it enough, if I work hard enough, I can definitely pursue this as a career option. And so after listening to that talk, I just asked a lot of questions to that speaker, and then eventually we became good friends, and then she helped me out and became a mentor of mine. And that's kind of how I moved from a hobbyist, seeing coding as like something for fun, to taking it really seriously and pursuing it as a career change.
Was that what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Actually, both marketing and software engineering were not career options that I thought about growing up. I actually never really thought about what I wanted to be growing up, but I just knew that innately I like to care for people around me. And my mom always told me growing up that I should be a nurse or someone who works in an industry that cares for other people, just because, yeah, that's something that I feel like I naturally kind of lean towards. Like, I feel like I'm quite an empathetic person, and I like to show care towards people around me. And then marketing just kind of happened because at the time when it came to picking what subjects to do for university, I didn't quite know what to do, but I just knew that I liked talking to people and I liked meeting people from different backgrounds and cultures. And so my parents just suggested, well, why not consider marketing? Because you're going to meet a lot of different people. You're going to have to come up with creative solutions to kind of sell things to different people. And at the time, it seemed like quite a broad topic to study. And so no matter what I wanted to do after university, I feel like studying marketing opened quite a few doors in that sense. But no, marketing or software engineering, neither of those were career options that I considered growing up.
That's so lovely for your mum to say that about you. That's really nice. I think we've all been in the place where we're looking at things to do at uni and we're thinking, what can we turn into a career? So yeah, I definitely understand that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I also think what you mentioned about not seeing it when you grew up is really important as well, because I definitely didn't know growing up that tech was a career for me. I didn't even know it really existed. I didn't know anyone in tech. So for me growing up, a bit like yourself, the idea of being a nurse, or for me I actually wanted to be a lawyer, was
Ooh.
very very obvious things for me. And it was only really then when I went to college I started to see that like media and tech was a thing. And actually now what I really try to do with my younger nieces and nephews is show them that like anything in tech is a possibility. Like even that game you're playing, like you're obsessed with playing an Xbox game because he's a teenager. That game you are playing is a career. That game you are playing, there are hundreds of people behind that game, from the 3D modelers, the story creators, the coders, the designers, the project managers, the testers. Like you could get paid to play a game and then just report bugs.
Yeah.
And I remember when I mentioned that to him for the first time, he went, what? Someone can pay me to play a game? I'm like, well, I mean, don't go and tell your teachers that, but like that is a career. So I think that's really important, having, knowing that actually tech is a possibility. And it's also incredibly creative as well. Like, it's not just sat behind a computer tapping away. Like, there is lots of interactions. You can travel, you can work from anywhere, there are actually so many possibilities with it. So
So
Mhm.
I don't want to butt in, but I do want to say the video games companies also need lawyers too. There are contracts behind those games. It is
that is
for
That
people
is
deciding
true.
between tech and law. If you're listening to this, you can just vote.
that is very
Yeah,
true.
definitely. And I think as well, it's so important to think about the velocity in which technology is developing. A lot of the times, I mean, thinking back to whenever I initially started working in tech, the role that I have now, I never even heard of it before. And the whole emergence of like Web3 and DeFi and stuff like that was still quite new. So thinking, and now with AI being such a huge topic, thinking back 5, 10 years ago, not that many people were ever considering a career within AI, let's say. And so it's so important to keep in mind that although right now there might be something on your mind in terms of like career options, but you never know what happens in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. A lot can change in that time, and it's okay to make changes and adapt to the market conditions and discover new interests. Like, I don't know, I have a lot of hobbies outside of coding too, and all of those options can also lead to cool career opportunities for sure. But I think right now coding is definitely the prevalent and more the option that takes priority for sure.
Yeah, one of the things I always say to, that my nieces and nephews is, remember, this is a job that you'll be doing, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
for most of your like hours of your week. So the main thing is just enjoy it. Like, pick something that you enjoy because you're doing it for a lot. And
Mhm.
also actually adding on to what you said, which is you can change at any point. Like, I think particularly my parents' generation and older was that, you went into this career and you stayed in that career for
Mhm.
life. But actually, that's not really the case anymore. So that's kind of the two things I keep telling them, now when they're like at school, picking what they quote want to do for their rest of their life, which is a ludicrous question to get asked, is that, yeah, you can change at any point. And this is something that I could rant about for so long. So I'm gonna I'll move on with your journey because this, that's this the aim of this podcast. So you touched on it, but nowadays you're a solutions engineer. Can you talk us through what that role entails?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I came across this role by chance, I would say. In my last company, I was working as a software engineer where I was helping build features for products of that company's. However, one of my friends actually referred me for this role within the blockchain industry, and that was just over 2 years ago. I initially joined as a developer relations kind of person, and 6 months into the role, the head of professional services asked me if I wanted to move teams and help out as a solutions engineer. Primarily, what a solutions engineer does is that we are more customer focused instead of building features for an internal product. So, as a solution engineer, what we need to do is meet with our company's customers, try and actively listen to hear what their main pain points are. Maybe they want to save costs on certain areas, or maybe they want to improve performance in other areas. Try and understand what they're trying to solve. And based on the engagement with the customers, we then go ahead and think about solutions and help design, let's say, what the software architecture might look like. And eventually, once that conversation has kind of come to an agreement and the customer seems happy with the design that we come up with for their problem, then we'll go ahead and also implement and develop that solution. So that might look like maybe a 6 months kind of engagement where we help them develop the full stack application. And in our case, obviously with blockchain, so we would build a full stack decentralized application. And at the end of that 6 or 9 month or 12-month period, we then kind of hand back that software or whatever app we build to the customer so that they can either take ownership of that and continue to develop it further, or we can continue that engagement further and help them build additional features based on what we've already built. So it's very customer focused, I would say, at least in my role at the moment. It still requires a lot of technical skills that a software engineer will need. However, on top of that, you definitely need a lot of communication skills in order to understand fully what the customer is looking for. And sometimes they might not necessarily even know what they're looking for. You kind of need to work with them to kind of figure out what their needs are. And also just be able to explain relatively complex technical concepts in easier to understand terms. For example, in the world of blockchain, there might be concepts that are quite hard to grasp for people who might not code, or people who stakeholders who don't often deal with this level of complexity in terms of technology. And so it's so important for us to be able to break things down in a way that's easier to absorb, and for them to fully see the benefits of using the technology that we build, basically.
Before we move on to blockchain, I had a very probably basic question about what you were saying. So you say that people come to you with a problem and you kind of build the solution to their problem. When you
Mhm.
say customer, again, very basic question, do you mean you work for a company and the customers are other teams in the company, or do you work for a company that produces apps for, completely independent companies like third-party customers, or do people do both and you just happen to do one of those?
So in our company in particular, we actually build software for external customers. So customers who pay to utilize our blockchain technology, but maybe they need a bit of support to actually be able to implement the blockchain technology into their current systems. So we actually are paid to help build software for them. So they don't work in our company.
That makes perfect sense. I always say to guests, Kim is the tech, I am not. So I did wonder that was a bit of a basic question, but yes.
No, not at all.
Thanks for clarifying. And you build for third-party companies, but your type of role, a solutions engineer, does that exist within companies as well? I mean, it must be a bigger company if it does.
When you say within companies, do you mind clarifying what you mean?
No, of course I don't. So what I mean is, if say you're a large company, say you're one of the Googles of the world, would you have an internal solutions engineering team so that, for example, can the legal team, for example, can go to the solutions engineering team and say, "Oh, we need this thing built in so to make us legally compliant with something." Do big
Mm.
companies have that kind of team, do you think?
I think it depends on the company itself. Obviously, each company might have different definitions of what a solutions engineer might be. But from what you've explained, I think it sounds like that sounds a bit more like an internal software engineering team that might build tools for, yeah, internal use.
Yeah, I'm eternally trying to get my head around the job titles and what they mean and how they fit together. So thanks for explaining.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually think the role links really nicely to what you said about growing up, which was, being a nurse and actually wanting to help people. Because actually, you know, there aren't many engineering roles actually that are so customer facing and so focused on how can we solve this problem for the customer, just the customer, not like the internal team, or, this isn't just a feature that we've been asked to build by someone internally. So I actually wish it was a role that existed more often, because I think often as developers we can forget who we're building the product for. And
Mhm.
there's often so many questions around like accessibility, like that, often websites and apps aren't accessible. So I actually wish it was a role that more companies had, because it isn't something that, I see too often. And I think it is crucial because we are building it for them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of the times, like as a techie, it's easy to get carried away about like, oh, that's a cool technical feature to add. And oh, like it'd be so cool if we can do this or that. But actually, it's so important to go back to the why. Like, why are we building the software in the first place? Do people actually see a use for a feature that we're building? Or are we just adding features for the sake of adding features? And yeah, exactly. And so I think it's so interesting. And I'm really grateful that this opportunity kind of sprung up whenever it did, because I never actually really knew what a solutions engineer did before then. A lot of the stuff that I was building was mostly kind of for internal, or at least for the end user to use, rather than like sitting down in the same room as like the customers and understanding what they want. And a lot of the times it kind of lies on the UX researcher or the product managers to understand that need. And I think as an engineer, we oftentimes don't get the opportunity to actually talk to the end user. So yeah, it's really cool for sure.
I mean, it's never something I've done in my in my 11 years of being a developer. So I think it's so good. And you also touched upon that, just before this at the same company, you were a developer advocate. And that's
Yeah.
again like another tech role. And I actually really like that we're talking, about all these different tech roles, because there are so many, opportunities within tech. So can you talk us through what that role entails as well, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as an individual within a developer relations team, there are a lot of different, I guess, tasks that can be assigned to you because the scope of DevRel is so wide. It's almost a combination of software engineering and marketing, whereby a lot of the times when there's a DevRel team in a company, it's oftentimes a company that is selling a particular technology that developers use quite regularly. And so the main important role, I guess, for a DevRel team to kind of have is to engage the developer community in, for example, hosting technical workshops or having Q&A sessions where you're able to help developers who are using the particular technology to debug code or answer questions, or just in general, create code samples or code, just like any type of code basically, that inspires them to build and inspires them to explore the technology that your company is selling to a bigger extent. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a financial transaction per se. Like, you don't necessarily need to translate, oh, like we're only hosting this technical workshop so that we get more sales. A lot of the times it's more focused on developer engagement, how much developers know about your products, and how well you're able to kind of transfer the knowledge from the product engineers who actually built the technology to then communicating that to the developers who are using that technology to build really cool software. And it definitely requires a very unique set of skills, I would say, because not only do you need to know how to code and have a very wide range of understanding in terms of how the technology works, but also how it could potentially be integrated with different technology stacks. But you also need to have really good communication skills. You're definitely talking to people from all backgrounds, all cultures. Literally, it could be anybody. And you want to make sure that the information that you're sharing is accurate and as up to date as possible. So you also need to have good communication skills internally with the product engineers and anyone who has touched the technology really, so that you're not sharing information that is outdated. Yeah, there are loads of different skills. Like, it could be people who are good at writing blogs, people who are good at filming content, people who are good at pair programming, opening up an IDE and coding along with the developer in the community, people who are good at giving public talks, like, demos and stuff like that. So it really encompasses a huge range of skills. And oftentimes you'll see in DevRel teams that different individuals within that team will have their particular niche area that they are an expert at. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. And I know something, you spoke a little bit then about public speaking, and I now want to segue on to the other thing you do a lot of, which is, you're such a huge advocate for sharing knowledge, diversity in tech, public speaking, coaching, and I know, I've been following you for a while, we've known each other for a while. So I think it's like nearly 3-4 years now. So I know that's also such a big passion of yours. And can you talk us through how you started to get involved with, coaching and public speaking? Because like you said, like that's such a different skill set as well.
I think initially, before I moved into the tech industry, I didn't actually do that many public speaking gigs. What kind of happened was, because I did a career switch into tech, and that wasn't at the time as popular as it is right now. And so a lot of the times I would get invited to speak at different events to talk about my journey, how I did it, share any tips, and also just in general encourage more people to consider the tech industry. And so that was kind of how I got introduced to doing public speaking. And then eventually it kind of moved on to more of a, how can I say? So like, I would go to different tech events, and the more events I would speak at, the more opportunities would come up as a result of speaking at a tech event. And so it kind of just like snowballed into something that I didn't really initially plan on doing. And it's quite funny because I remember there was one of the earlier tech events that I spoke at, I actually forgot to introduce who I was. So I did the entire talk, and no one knew what I did, who I was. They were just like, okay, this random person is just giving us a talk, but we have no clue who she is. And then, yeah, so I feel like along the way, definitely my public speaking skills has improved as a result of the mistakes I've made, and that's so normal. But I think what really matters to me and why I choose to do these public speaking gigs, is because a lot of the times after these talks, I end up meeting different people who share their journey with me. And for me, I find that so inspiring and also very fulfilling, especially if someone is also going through what I went through whenever I initially did my career change. Sometimes learning how to code on your own or learning how to code after work can feel like a very isolating experience. And so, if there's anything that I can do to help someone feel a little less alone, that makes me feel really happy. And so that's kind of why I like to do these public speaking gigs. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun for sure. But definitely sometimes it can be intimidating.
Yeah, yeah. And I bet you now never forget to introduce yourself.
Yeah. First thing.
And it is, you're totally right, because public speaking is definitely something that takes practice. Every time something goes wrong,
Mhm.
you typically don't make that mistake again, or you just get more comfortable with mistakes happening, particularly if you're on stage. And most of the time people are okay with it because we're human. We're not a robot on the stage giving a talk, and most people are empathetic. So you also, what I found, you definitely get more comfortable with being okay with like certain mistakes happening and going, well, do you know what, I'm human and
Yeah.
mistakes happen, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. And most of the time people won't remember, like in 5 minutes, 10 minutes time, they'll be like, oh, it was good. So it's all good. It's not that deep.
I I often sometimes also find it, and I don't know if this is a bit mean, but I sometimes find it a bit more reassuring when I do see a mistake happen, and I go, oh, phew, it's not just me. Like, and
Mhm.
it just humanizes it so much more by saying, do you know what, even this amazing speaker who I know is like a really well-known speaker, do you know what, they just made a mistake, and oh, you know what, I do too, and now I feel better. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's a bit nice seeing when mistakes happen.
So true, so true. And I guess like how else are you going to improve and grow, right? If every single time I'm not saying you have to make mistakes, but it's only through those mistakes will you then know what to work on, what to improve on, how to do better.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Me and Phoebe are both just nodding and going, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I completely agree. I remember one of my first days at law school, I was really worried about doing some advocacy, and one of the instructors said to me, people really aren't paying as much attention to you as you think they are. So I know what you mean about how even if you make a mistake 10 minutes later, no one else will remember. But
Mhm.
like you said, with failing to introduce yourself, I bet that's burned in your brain and you now never forget.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, if anything, in terms of like tips for public speaking, I would definitely say instead of trying to memorize a talk or anything, it's actually way more useful to get comfortable with improvisation. So, I actually try to push myself to practice with my sister or my friends before I give talks. But instead of trying to make it perfect, and try to memorize everything that I'm going to talk about, I actually focus more on, okay, how can I focus on improvisation if I forget something? How can I circle back to the point that I wanted to make in the first place if I start to drift away somewhere, or if I forget to introduce myself, for example? And I think that actually is a great skill that is very versatile and will always help in situations where you have to give a talk.
Definitely. I know a few, people in tech who also give talks, but they do regular improv classes in London, because
Mm.
improv, like I used to do it when I did drama and stuff, when I was younger, but like it's just incredibly fun. Like, and it really teaches you to like think quick, think on the spot, and also just be okay sometimes with a bit of silence. Like, silence is okay. And it's the same public speaking. Like, you may think that sip of water that you're taking on stage feels like 5 minutes, but actually it is just 5 seconds,
Yeah.
and actually you're totally right. Like, improv and learning those skills really does help with public speaking.
Mhm.
And the other thing you do a lot of is coaching, and I know you coach at Code First Girls, you're an ambassador for them. Can you tell us, the work that you do with them? Because, the work they do is amazing. We really want to be an advocate for other organizations as well. So can you talk us through what it is you do with them as well?
Yeah, for sure. So in short, Code First Girls is an organization that aims to help more women and non-binary people learn how to code for free, which I think is an incredible mission to have. And personally, I work at Code First Girls as an interview coach as well as their technical coach. So what that means is whenever there are candidates who are applying for a sponsored position, if they want to do a Code First Girls degree, then I will go ahead and help them in preparation for their interviews with those sponsoring companies. And what I really focus on is behavioral related questions that refer to the STAR model. So answering behavior related questions using the framework of STARS, so situation, task, action, and result. And actually, this is a really great mindset to have whenever we're approaching these sort of questions because it gives a lot of structure and it makes it a lot more impactful in terms of explaining what exactly was the situation, how you kind of approached it, really kind of practical action steps that were taken, and also it's always nice to finish off with the results of what you did. And so, it's not specific to Code First Girls. The STAR model is a very well-known model that is used for behavioral questions. And obviously I love helping people, but as a result, it also made me feel a lot more comfortable when I'm answering behavioral questions because now it's almost like a natural reflex that I think about whenever I'm asked any sort of question related to that. And then on the flip side, when it comes to technical coaching, so what I do for that aspect is I help graduates of Code First Girls, so people who have already done the CFG degree or the Code First Girls degree, and they're doing their very first tech job as a software engineer or whatever the roles might be. At the moment, I'm more focused on graduates who have done the software engineering course. And I will give them kind of guidance in terms of the tech stack that they're using, if they have any issues with debugging, if they have any questions related to the tech stack that their team is using, if they need any support when it comes to understanding architectural diagrams, if they have any questions related to even stuff that isn't technical that a lot of software engineers experience in their tech roles to start off with, anything related to kind of building up that confidence when it comes to asking questions, kind of the structure when it comes to resolving any algorithmic issues. Yeah, honestly, it just covers a whole lot of like what it's like having your first role as a software engineer. And that's kind of what I do as a coach with Code First Girls. But as you mentioned, I'm also an ambassador for them, so I also attend different events representing Code First Girls. I love to talk about the incredible work that they do, and also any sort of kind of if they have any partnerships that they launched. I also like to take part in that and meet the sponsoring companies and people who work at those companies, just to understand like what their plans are, what teams these graduates would be working in, all that fun stuff.
Nice. And I think it's so important to focus on the interviewing part actually, because often, and we're quite guilty of it at codebar as well. We often focus so much on the coding element that actually that's not really going to get you the job. The interview is it's a really daunting experience. It's scary, and actually having someone that can help them go through that and guide them and give them advice and tips is such a good idea.
Mhm.
So before we wrap up and let you go, I'm intrigued to know what the future looks like for Janine. Is there anything you want to do in tech? Is there anything you've got your eyes on? Is there anything that particularly excites you? Like, what's the future looking like?
Yeah, so I've actually never been someone who likes to set like a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, just because growing up, I don't know what it was. Like, I think because I've moved around quite a lot growing up, it was just really hard to make a solid 5, 10-year plan and like stick to that. Also, I'm someone who gets carried away quite easily sometimes. Like, I get interested in a new thing, a new shiny thing. I'm like, oh, maybe I want to do this. And don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but it's got
It's
me
the
this far.
perfect career for tech.
Literally, literally. But what I would say is in summer this year, I got my GCP architect certification, which I'm so happy about. And so I really want to explore that side a little bit more. So I've been full stack dev now for, I think, about 6 years, and I'd really love to progress in my career in a sense of, taking a more overarching view when it comes to software design. And also, of course, now that AI is such a big thing, I would love to really get familiar with that, and potentially on the side, I actually didn't mention this, but I'm currently helping. I'm volunteering to help out with a health tech startup on the side just for fun, and they utilize AI in their solution. And that's something that I really want to take more time to do outside of my work that I already have, is to kind of help give back a little bit more. Obviously, like I'm very passionate about the work that I do in my 9 to 5. It's not 9 to 5, whatever hours I do. But I feel like it's so important to also give back in a sense that doing something that makes you feel fulfilled and like makes you feel good. And so I think, working in health tech, that's something that really excites me, and working with people who are very medically knowledgeable. I think that's an area that also excites me a lot. So yeah, I'm hoping in the next couple of years I'd be able to progress in my career in a more architectural side and also give back more.
I know that Kim promised that would be the last question, but I actually had a question. You said earlier on in your answer that you just got a certification and it had an acronym, and I can't for the life of me, as I said, I'm not very well, remember the acronym. Could you just tell us a bit about what that certification is in case people were interested to know more? Either that or
Yeah.
it's really a well-known certification and I just haven't heard of it, but yes.
Not at all. I'm so sorry that I didn't explain. Actually, I should have explained. So actually, the certification I got is the Google Cloud Professional Architect certification. So this is a certification that is specific to the Google Cloud platform, and yeah, it basically encompasses any sort of skill set related to how someone might design and architect software for any sort of business use case. So that's. I hope that kind of clears it up a little bit.
Yes,
Does
it
that?
definitely does. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Oh. Well, I'm so excited to see, what Janine is doing in a few years and, continue to follow your journey for many, many years. So I just want to end by saying the biggest thank you ever for coming on our podcast today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was such a fun evening talking to both of you. Yeah, I look forward to future episodes as well. I can't wait to see who else you're going to have on the podcast. And yeah, have a lovely week ahead.
Thank you so much, Janine. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.